Welcome everyone to another edition of Deconversion Stories. I hope you guys like my new music intro. It was done up for me by my producer, Mikey. He did it up using one of our songs from my band Luminous called Tangled. So if you like the tune, or what you heard of it anyways, you can go check us out on SoundCloud. Just type in my name, Neil Bernstein, and it'll give you, or Luminous, either way, I think it'll give you all of our music there if you dig it. And it's Liminnis, just in case you need the spelling. Today I'm chatting with my friend Diogenes, is that house master? Of Mayberry, who is, we're going to be discussing his journey away from his former belief system, and also a little bit about how he got involved with the international, or is that it? AAI or AIAA? Because there's now two of them. Yeah, AAI, as the blog manager. Which sounds kind of interesting. So we'll get into that a little bit later on. But first, we're going to chat about his deconversion, and we'll just go from there. So why don't you kind of take us back, I guess, to when you were once a believer, whatever belief system you were involved with, and sort of tell us about how the dominoes started falling. You found your way out of it into becoming the activist that you are today.
Okay. Yeah. So I grew up, like maybe you and a lot of your listeners, I grew up in Canada. In Southern Ontario, and I was a member of the United Church.
Okay.
And I attended church every Sunday, and moderate church is fairly moderate, by most standards, fairly liberal church. And then when I was in grade 9, there was a private Baptist school in our town. So I went to this Baptist school for grades 8 and 9, grades 8 and 9, I went to that school. Mm-hmm. Where they're heavily indoctrinated on, every day, had like the born again experience. And I remember distinctly in grade 9 biology class, as we were learning about fossils, learning how that they were deposited on tops of mountains in the flood with Noah. So I thought that was
right.
some rather spurious science. And then grade 10, I was back in a normal high school. And started drifting away. And I was always one, I watched the news a lot. So I was constantly watching like ABC Nightly News with Peter Jenner, or is it Peter? Yeah, Peter Jennings.
Yeah.
So I was fairly up on what was going on in the world and watching all the stuff that's going on like in the Middle East. And went off to university, and I took a world religions class in university as one of my electives. And just watching the news again, it just started. I basically came out of university, I would say, as a deist. I still believe in a God, but I had stopped attending church when I went to university, like I did all up through high school.
What was it that caused you to stop going to church? Was it just what you learned, like about the Bible being kind of fictitious?
No, it's just probably because I was in university, and it's Sunday morning, and I didn't really want to get up and bother to go.
Gotcha.
And then I was thinking, because I was thinking about preparing mentally for our conversation this week, and it was around 1995. I think it was when Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated in 1995. And I distinctly remember like the epiphany moment, like that aha moment. I was driving down Erin Mills Parkway in Mississauga, and kind of reflecting on all of this tribal infighting between the Israelis and the Palestinians that never ends. And yet the guy who assassinated,
tell me, I lived there.
Yeah, the guy who assassinated Rabin was actually another Jew. And I had this dawning aha moment that religion is entirely arbitrary and completely subjective, just depending on the family you grew up in, the society you grew up in, the country you're born into. And I think from there, just over the next 10 years, it just kind of slowly wound down. Somewhere probably in my early 30s, I wouldn't even have considered myself a deist. It's more of an agnostic, kind of believe that there might be something out there. And then one day, probably in my mid to late 30s, I just realized one day I just didn't believe anymore. So there was never any hard and fast, I don't believe it. It was just kind of a gradual transition away from it to the point where it's like, oh, isn't that interesting? I don't believe it anymore.
So you didn't wake up or just one day, or I guess you kind of just said it like, oh, I don't really believe anymore. So that was like, would you say like your defining moment? Is that when you first called yourself an atheist, you think?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. It was just interesting. And I don't really know why it happened. I know to jump ahead a little bit, my road into sort of becoming advocacy came in, I think 2008 or 2009. There was a foreigners or an expats forum online, and I was living in Hong Kong at the time, and there had been some creationist teachers in Hong Kong high schools who were trying to push creationism in the classroom, and
Really?
so this big debate ignited on the forum, and my answers started getting longer and longer and longer. And, one guy challenged me to I was throwing out these little trite one-liners. And one of the theists on the blogs, challenged me to back up my answer with facts. So I ended up writing like a 3,000 word essay, with like just all the facts, to deconstruct his argument. And that's when it occurred to me that, hey, there's a book in here somewhere. This isn't just a forum dialogue. There's more here I can do. And so this was during the sort of global financial meltdown of 2009, when a lot of companies were struggling, and I was sitting at my desk at work, and there's nothing to do because, one, it was August in Hong Kong, so everybody in August goes back to Vancouver. All the Vancouver people leave and go back to Vancouver and get out of the heat. So there's nothing going on basically in August, and it was the middle of the financial crisis, and I was bored out of my skull at work. And so just to pass the time, I just started writing, and started writing the book, and just 3 years later, I had a finished product. So
right on. 3 years, wow. So I guess it was quite a bit of a journey to get everything you wanted in that book, I'm assuming.
Yeah, my dad read it and said it was like a data dump. So
really?
Yeah.
I do have links, by the way, guys, down below to his actual personal website, and I believe there's a link there that you can go follow to. If you're interested in checking out the book, there is a link there that you can do that as well.
Yeah, I'm good. On my blog, I've got blog articles on the main page. Manifest Insanity is the book, and so on that tab has excerpts directly from the book. Next to that is a tab I've called Bite-Sized Bible Breakdowns, which was a short blog that I've been working on. I haven't worked on it this year, which is just short little soundbite answers to where stories in the Bible came from. My intention is to turn it into a YouTube webcast one of these days, like awesome. A little 1 or 2 minute, hey, you believe this story about the Exodus? Well, here's the highlights. So.
Right on. Right on. Actually, I have your YouTube channel linked below as well. You don't really have a whole crap load of stuff up there yet, but it's good to know that you're going to actually start uploading some stuff to there, because I'd be interested in checking it out for sure.
Yeah, one day. I'm more the writer. I'm not really a YouTube star, so I concentrate on the writing side of things.
Yeah, but that could lead into it. I mean, if you're good at writing, then you'll be just as equally as good at just, speaking your positions as well. I mean, you could do it quite easily. And you don't even have to write anything. You just talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or type. Nowadays it's type, I guess. But
yeah, I mean, I fully intend to do it. So I've pretty much finished the Old Testament version, and then I wanted to do all the New Testament stories, but I'm working on a new book this year, which has taken up all of my mental energy. I just focus on that 24/7. So I do get back to it from time to time when I've got a bit of mental space.
Sure. What are we looking for in the new book? Is this the one you're basing off the New Testament? Is that what you just said?
No. The new book it sounds boring probably to most people. It's a history of atheism and secular arguments.
Okay.
Because last summer I was reading a book by an Oxford professor on the history of Christianity, and it dawned on me that there's tons and tons of books on religion, but there's not really a lot of books out there on the history of atheism, and the ones that are tend to be directed at other academics, like the Oxford Handbook, and there's another one that came out about 20, 30 years ago, and it's really kind of heavy on the scholarship. And I think it's mainly directed at other professors and kind of thickly written. And like you said, the one's 30 years old. The Oxford Handbook came out, I think, in 2013, so it's fairly new, but it doesn't really go into a lot of depth. So what my book is it occurred to me that there's, we went from this period of when we burnt atheists at the stake to you got Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris, Dan Dennett, and then previously Christopher Hitchens, who are international celebrities. And I thought, how did we get there? There's a story here of the journey from burning people to global celebrity. So this book is a history of atheism and the secular arguments and how they were advanced over time, particularly how, I wrote actually the middle of the book first. So I started with Thomas Hobbes in Leviathan and Benedict Spinoza and the Theological Political Treatise, written in the 1600s. And one of the aspects I talk about were, well, what are the laws in England and Holland that are going on at the time? They can only go so far without getting into serious trouble. And they did get into trouble. In England in the 1650s, they wanted to, there was a call for Thomas Hobbes to be executed. And, and it's very obvious reading the book that he's a Christian, but he's challenging traditional authority. Spinoza wasn't in jail of being killed, but his books were banned and he was, thoroughly reviled. So, I'm not just documenting who and what they wrote, but I'm talking about the society that they're living in at the time as well. And sort of like what law, this is the law that's in place. They can't really go as far. And there's actually two interesting quotes. One by a Harvard professor from the 1930s, who speculates that had Spinoza been, had a stronger spine and lived a little bit later, what would he have really said? Because you can tell he's holding back in places.
Sure.
So, yeah. So it's interesting. So I'm finishing up each chapter is going to be its own era. So I'm finishing up the first chapter. We start at the beginning. We start with the ancient Greeks and the Romans and the handful of Hindu and Persian sort of examples of agnostic and skeptical thinking that there are, but mainly focused on the Greeks and the Romans and the handful of them whose writings have survived, who have made rather irreverent comments about the gods. So I'm just finishing that up. And then obviously we move into the Middle Ages where the Catholic Church keeps everybody locked down. So I'm going to so chapter 2 will be just a really brief history of the rise of the Vatican. So how did the Vatican get so much power and what was going on in Europe at the time? And then chapter 3 would be the Renaissance and the reemergence of all this classical literature and then moving into the Reformation and then on into the Enlightenment and American and French revolutions and founding of secular republics. But even in the U.S., in a secular republic, you still have examples of repression, like the going into the Scopes monkey trial in 1922 or 1925. That even in the U.S. in the 20th century, you have examples where you still can't be fully open. Even today, you can't be an atheist and run for president, without losing half your voting base.
Well, you can. You just have to keep it under wraps.
Yeah, like Trump.
Yeah, and pretend to be something. He's literally pretending to be something he's not. Like president, for example. Because he doesn't have what we would normally consider the right educational chops to do a job like that, but somehow the guy made it in there. But anyways, that's or you're going to say something there.
Yeah. So like that, I think real Christians know he's a pseudo-Christian, like the photo ops with the Bible upside down and talking about 2 Corinthians, which just makes me think of, 2 Corinthians went into a bar.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And when he was asked to recite his favorite Bible passage, he couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows he's faking it, but the Christian right doesn't care because he's stacking he's stacking the Supreme Court, and that's their ultimate end goal. So they're willing to cut him a little slack.
Yeah, I suppose. Hello, Mikey. My producer has just shown up in the chat. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see, I think, in a couple of months, or in not even a couple of months now. It's coming up real soon. I keep forgetting we're at the end of October.
I think it's 10 days away now.
Exactly, 10 days away now. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you. I'm hoping that he doesn't get elected back in, but
I think the whole world is kind of hoping he doesn't get back in.
Yeah, I mean, and Americans really should not want that to happen, because he's kind of a joke around the globe, if you ask me.
He's a buffoon, but there's a lot of people concerned about Biden as well. That they make the point that you were vice president for 8 years, and what did you do, and what's all this stuff going on with Hunter Biden? Like, why is your son on boards that he's not qualified to be on? So, Biden's establishment.
Yeah, but he does have a history of being involved with politics, and that's something that Trump never had. He's just a businessman, and not a very good one if you look at all his failures. But at least Biden is somewhat qualified. He may not be the best choice, but he's better than the one that's in there now. I'll give him that much.
Yeah, I think global markets would appreciate having someone with some stability in their mind back in that office.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit more about the whole deconversion thing. I want to ask your family. I'm assuming most of them are still here in Canada.
My parents are still there, and they attend church every Sunday, and my mom sings in the choir, as did my grandfather. My mom's been singing in the choir for, I don't know, 60, 70 years.
There, I have to flash the coins thing. I just heard it, or realized that it went off. My phone has a Mario coin sound effect for every time I get a notification. And it's become a little bit of a thing now where every time we hear the coin, everyone has to take a drink. So it's like a little bit of a drinking game. So just so you know.
Okay.
You're drinking coffee. I already did my coffee thing this morning. And then, of course, I did the live show with Andy and Seamus called the Atheist Drinking Out Loud. So I've already put a couple under my belt already before we even got going. And I always like to have my beers during the shows anyways, but I try to, maintain some form of cool so that I'm not completely stupid,
Have you seen Drunk History?
Yes, I have.
we should do one of those, drunk Christian history.
Christian history. That's an idea.
See how lucid I can be and talk about some fascinating historical point while I'm, 3 sheets.
We should actually maybe consider doing that. That might be a fun episode to do someday.
Maybe one with Randolph on your new Canadian podcast.
Yeah. Actually, having Randolph in would be a lot of fun too. Yeah, we're doing that. Actually, you could be a call-in, and we could talk a little bit about that. And,
sure.
Because it is a new call-in show. True Not Torque is what he's talking about, guys. True Not Torque talk is what he's talking about. And I believe there's a link for the channel in the description box below as well if you guys want to go and sub to that. We're getting everything ready. The studio is being set up. It's coming soon. I can't say exactly when, but it will be probably hopefully before Christmas. I'm hoping, or shortly thereafter. Guaranteed it'll be happening by the new year, but that's about as close as I can give you. But anyways, so with your folks and stuff still being churchgoers and whatnot, still being believers, how do they know? I'm assuming they've got to know that you're an atheist by now. And how do they handle that?
That's one of the reasons why. So my pen name is Diogenes of Mayberry, and most people don't get the in joke. Some people get it. People who've got some classical literature. So Diogenes was a famous Greek cynic who basically just disdained every aspect of human stupidity, and Mayberry goes back to that old Ron Howard, Andy Griffith show, sure. Right? So Mayberry, so small town America. So the name came up. It was during the Biden's first election. I think it was Obama and McCain. I think it was the McCain-Obama election with that train wreck of a VP he had. And the Republicans kept harping on, small town American values, and it just went over and over and over again. And so Mayberry is sort of the iconic vision of small town American values. So Diogenes of Mayberry is the cynic of small town America. So even though I'm Canadian and I don't live in America, I'm the small town American cynic. Mm-hmm. And so one of the reasons I used that name was because I wanted to, when I wrote the book, so the book's called Manifest Insanity, which is a play on the American manifest destiny, about, how the Americans have, the Americans are an outlier, right? When you look at XY graphs of education and income and religiosity, America's kind of the outlier on that scheme. And so it just seems kind of weird that America is so highly religious. And so my book, as I said, the book kind of started off as we were fighting back against the creationist in the classroom argument. And I thought, there's more to the Bible than just debunking the creation story. So the book evolved itself into becoming a history of most of the biblical doctrines, like evolution, Noah, creationism, the Exodus, and then moving into the New Testament. And then I have it. The book is set in a Christian high school, and so information is presented in different classes. So I actually later in the book, I have an American history class and I have an American civics class where I talk about things like in the American opposition to abortion and gay rights and that fight, and how did evangelicalism evolve in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And so that's where the whole Manifest Insanity came from. And I lost my train of thought for a sec.
No worries. I derail all the time, so it's okay.
And so the idea of the book is to try to present the history of the argument. And so I was hoping that when this book came out, it would be this huge international bestseller. And then I could turn around to my parents and go, hey, by the way, I'm Diogenes of Mayberry, the guy that wrote that New York Times bestseller. Mm-hmm. So I finally maybe about 2-3 years ago, I finally came out to my parents that I was an atheist. And my dad was like, yeah, we've kind of picked that up from your posts on Facebook that you are. And we've just hoped that you've lost your way and one day you'll find your way back. And I went, yeah, that's not going to happen. I've spent 3 years researching this book, reading all of these scholarly texts, because so basically what Manifest Insanity is so I go through the Scopes trial in science class. I go through the Bible in Bible studies class. I go through, like I said, civics and history. Mm-hmm. And so I've read maybe 50 books by scholars on the Scopes. I mean, I actually quote the Scopes trial from the trial transcripts that are online. I'm quoting multiple biblical scholars, archaeologists, historians. That's why my dad called it a data dump. And so it's just packed with information. And like last summer I did a second edition and I built an index, and even I was shocked looking at a 20-page index. Like I'm like, holy crap, there is a lot more information in there than I thought. And so when my dad says, oh, we think you're going to come back, I'm like, you can't unring that bell. I mean, I just know too much. I know all about the origins of this this religion, and one of my parents, one of their closest friends, she was my 4th grade teacher, and her husband was my childhood minister. And she said, supportively, she said, I'm like a light, shining the truth into the darkness where all of this sort of false dogma and doctrine has been built up over the centuries. And I thought that was really weird, coming from a devout Christian to call me like this beacon of light,
What she said,
was kind of, she called me like a beacon of light, because I'm shining a light into, because a lot of this doctrine and dogma is fake. It's built up over the years. And
it's not just fake, true. It's stolen from other stories too.
Yeah. And like one of the points I make, I think it's on the back cover blur of the book, is a lot of people think that religions, like with the creationism, that religion just emerged on the on the 7th day, whole intact, and that they've always been like that. I'm like, no, religions evolve, and they evolve sometimes very significantly different things. Like Judaism went through at least 3 different evolutionary stages where they changed almost completely.
Yep. Well, I grew up Jewish, so Actually, it's one of the things I always like when I'm talking to, say, a Christian or something, and they're going on about how Jesus is the only way to the Father, yada yada, and then I would come up and say, well, really, if that's the case, then why did your favorite deity have me born to Christians, the correct path according to you, yet given up for adoption and then raised by Jews, the very people that don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah? Like, why would he do that?
Yeah.
If going through Jesus is the only way to get to the Father, why would he do that to me?
Yeah.
Then they go, you're just angry.
When I had that arbitrary subjective thought back in '95, that was one of the examples I used was adoption. Like, that's one of the things I was thinking about, that, if twins are brought up, or, and they're separated, and one's Jewish and one's Muslim, and yet they're the same person. So it's completely subjective what religion they are, and it's completely arbitrary. Yeah. So it's ridiculous.
Pretty much how you were raised is really what it is, right? If you're born into, I was born to Christians, but yet I was raised Jewish. So you can't say you're born into religion, because I was born into one, but raised as another. Well, not into religion. My folks weren't really all that religious, but.
And when you look at the history, Islam and Christianity are just Jewish cults. So,
yep, pretty much.
Well, Islam's more of a Judeo-Christian cult, but
Yeah, I mean, one spawned the next, which spawned the next, which they all come off the same Abrahamic belief system, for lack of a better way of putting it. But I mean, and let's face it, Judaism wasn't even monotheistic in its origin. Right. Nope. Before it was really Judaism, they had an ancient Israelite type belief system that had other deities, and that's why your commandment of "Thou shalt worship no other gods before me" is in there, because back then there were other gods according to the Israelites, ancient Israelites, and stuff like that. So
yeah, and apparently God had a female companion who eventually got weeded out.
Yes, that's right. Well, she had to. I mean, if the book was going to be, all about women being second-class citizens, then of course she had to be, according to this guy, anyways. But he's more of an alpha god. So, I mean, he definitely in the book, anyways, displays tendencies of a primate brain. That's for sure. Yeah. Which a deity, if they're real, they shouldn't. They're above and beyond all that shit, you would think.
Yeah, and and the scholars know all this. There's like, did you ever see the 10 Commandments when you were a kid with Charlton Heston?
Yes, of course.
And like the whole golden calf thing. Well, that's Baal, right? The religion of Canaan was, Baal was the chief god.
Yeah.
There's an interesting book. A Yale professor named John Collins has a book called A Short Introduction to the Hebrew Bible. And he deconstructs the story in Daniel where the Son of Man is coming. And he talks about the imagery that is in that story. And Daniel was written about 200 years before Jesus, give or take, a generation. Mm-hmm. And he's describing the imagery of how the Son of Man is described. And it's like, this is Cain, like that Baal, the imagery that's given is how Baal was described. So it's very interesting that it's all been incorporated.
Thanks very much, Derek. I always appreciate it. All right. I mean, I think every religion that has ever existed on this planet has gone through an evolution of steps. I mean, because you go back far enough, even Hinduism or Buddhism, they've all gone through sort of an evolution, right? Because people were using their beliefs, being whatever religion they were, as an excuse to go around and just destroy others with it, because their God is more powerful than this one, and he's told us that we have to wipe these people out, or because they don't believe in him or them or whoever, right? And it's been an excuse to go to war for humans for centuries, millennia, literally.
There's a fantastic book I used in my research on my new book. If any of your listeners are into reading in the intellectual side, it's called The Greek Buddha by Professor Christopher Beckwith. Mm-hmm. And it talks about how Buddhism evolved out of a confrontation with Zoroastrianism. That when the Persians came into India and brought Zoroastrianism with them, that's Buddha sort of reacted to that absolutism, that the dualistic nature of Zoroastrianism, that there's a yes, no, there's a good, the bad, and Buddha's like, no, that you can't have absolutes in life. That's the path to like confusion. So Zoroastrianism was a rejection. Buddhism was a rejection of Zoroastrianism. And then he talks about how Brahmanism absorbed Zoroastrianism. So Hinduism absorbed Zoroastrianism, like Judaism did, like Christianity did, like Islam did, whereas Buddhism didn't. And he talks in the book again about, he calls it early Buddhism, and then he calls normative Buddhism, which is what it evolved into centuries later. Right. So it's quite, if people are into the history and they want it, it's a really fantastic read.
Fantastic. Is there a link available on your website for that one?
I can give one to you later if you want to pop it in, but it's called Greek Buddha. And what it means is during the conquest of Alexander, Pyrrho went to India, became a Buddhist, and then he came back to Greece and essentially became the Greek Buddha. And then he goes on to, so he founds the skeptic school. He influences Epicurus. He influences the Stoics. So he's got a huge influence on Greek philosophy and how that's gone into European enlightenment. And yet it all goes back to Buddha.
Interesting. See, I never even knew about that avenue. That's wow. I'm definitely going to check out that link then and have a little look-see.
I wrote an article. I'll send you the link for that as well. I did an article on Medium about 2-3 weeks ago called "How Buddha Influenced the Western Secular Democracy." Just it's a short 4-minute read, like just making those causal links. So I can send that to you as well.
That would be great. I would appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, it came out of the research I'm doing on my new book, where I was reading. I did Spinoza first, and I'm reading Spinoza, and like within 5 minutes, I'm like, wow, this is really, really Buddhist. And so I emailed the American professor who wrote the book, and he goes, no, he's a Stoic. And I'm like, no, this is heavily Buddhist. This isn't Stoic. And so I started digging into it, and the more I dug into it, then I find Pyrrho, and I find Pyrrho who influences Epicurus, and then I find Epicurean strains in Spinoza, and then I find a book that just came out by an Australian professor, or a professor in Australia, he's Greek, called Spinoza the Epicurean. So this professor in the US who insisted he's Stoic, I'm like, no, he's Buddhist all the way through, and it comes through Epicurus. So.
Awesome. What did he say in response to that? Did he kind of sort of take your word and okay, he did?
He hasn't. I think he didn't. Maybe I didn't like me showing him that he was wrong, but
it happens.
But a lot of Spinoza scholars haven't recognized that it's Buddhist. Like I even quote one professor who wrote a paper that said, how come nobody notices this?
Wow. So, wow. Well, maybe in time. Maybe it takes a little bit of time for that to sort of sink in, I mean,
yeah.
Nobody likes being told they're wrong. However, I'm kind of in the camp that if I'm wrong, I want to know, because I don't want to be wrong anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'd rather be, knowledgeable about something than be wrong about it, right? So, hello, the Maverick. Welcome to my show. I hope you enjoy what you're hearing. Maverick is a newbie to the show. Welcome. Anyways, if you like what you hear, hit that subscribe button. Definitely.
Well, I see someone, Irish Swede, says Epicurean philosophy is Stoic. I'll have to respectfully disagree. They are at odds with each other. I actually just documented a story from a Syrian satirist named Lucian, who, in a debate between an Epicurean and a Stoic, just ripped the Stoics a new asshole. It's a really funny quote.
What's the quote?
It says the Stoics, they're using the Stoic argument that it is, if the gods exist, it's right to honor them, and we wouldn't honor that which doesn't exist, therefore the gods exist. And then Lucian says it is right to honor the wise man if one exists. It's therefore not right to honor one who doesn't exist, therefore the gods exist. And he says, which really pisses off the Stoics, because their wise man has yet to appear.
Nice. I want to talk a little bit about how did you end up getting involved with why can I never remember this?
Atheist Alliance International.
That's the one. That's the one. And become their blog manager.
Yeah, back when my book came out in 2013. Yeah, and I was active on Facebook and posting, and then Michael Sherlock, who's the current executive director, reached out to me. I guess Michael's really good at connecting atheists all over the world, and he wants us to be a community that supports each other. And so Michael had reached out to me and said, "Hey, I've got a blog. Would you maybe write some articles for me?" And we actually ended up at a conference together in Taipei in 2016. The Humanists International had their Asia Humanist Conference, and we were both speakers there where we got to meet. And so we've stayed in touch. And then when he became executive director, he reached out to me and asked me if I would want to be the blog manager, because he knows my style of writing. He knows that I'm very detail oriented on the facts, and I edit carefully. So he wanted me to be the blog manager,
Awesome.
which I happily accepted.
So do you post a lot of your stuff on there, or do you just basically kind of edit other people's stuff and post it?
Mostly edit other people's stuff. I've posted maybe only 3 or 4 articles. Like I said, when I'm writing this book, so the title of my new book is Dangerous Ideas, because it's dangerous to the church. And just absorbs all of my mental capacity. So, I mean, I write if I get inspired, if something happens in the news, or if somebody says, "Hey, can you write about this story?" Then I can do it. But mostly I've been editing other people's stuff, but I think it's been quiet. I think COVID has really messed with a lot of people's minds, and a lot of people are really stressed. So there's not a lot of activity on the blog. Because I think just a lot of people's heads just aren't in that space where they're able to write. So, but we do have one. We have a blogger named Landon Haynes. He blogs fairly frequently, and Landon's really up on on Enlightenment philosophy and the Greek philosophy. So he's actually been really helpful with me on the research for my book. He's like, "Oh, hey, you should check out this source and read this quote." And so he's actually pointed me to quite a few good quotes.
No, fantastic.
Okay.
Just want to say a quick shout out. Thank you, Pete, for your donation to the show. I was always wondering what kind of dollars these were, so I was calling them super god dollars because it's SGD, right? So I was like, I don't know what that even is. Yes, thanks for the super chat. So how long have you been with them now as a blog?
Summer, probably around June I started.
Just this summer?
Yeah, I would say around June, yeah.
Oh, wow. I from just chatting with you briefly before, I thought you had been involved with them for quite some time. I didn't realize it was that recent that you became
I think it was this summer. So I think since then I've written maybe 4 blogs. One of them was our social media director, Rosie, pointed out. I think one of them had at the time like something like 800 views, and most of their blogs have like 50 to 100 reads. And the one I had something like close to 1,000, and it was
wow.
It was on the history of the abuse in the Catholic Church. That this is a 2,000-year-old problem. Like this is not a 21st century issue. This has been going on from the beginning, and there is lots of documentation out there about it. So
awesome. Have you been digging it? Like, is it something you get into, or like doing it?
The blogging?
Yeah. Like doing their doing the work for them. I mean, do you like what you see people contributing, that kind of thing?
Yeah, and I've caught a couple of mistakes just because I've got like history in my head. Like one of the blogs came in last week, and they quoted the wrong Bible verse, and I knew it was the wrong Bible verse just because I talk about it in Manifest Insanity. That the end of Mark. The original book of Mark stopped at, I think, either verse 8 or 16. I can't remember exactly. And they were talking about something that, oh, this verse in Mark. I'm like, nope, that's at the very end. That wouldn't be in the beginning. And so I just happened to know that little fact, so I was able to catch that mistake and correct the verse.
Someone in the chat named Kara H thinks that you joined AI a few months before that. Smiley face.
Maybe. Kara, that's Tina. Kara H is Tina. Tina is our director for the Atheist Support Network.
Oh, cool.
So, as I'm also a volunteer with AAI, so we're talking to people around the world who write into the AAI Facebook and say, hey, I'm in trouble. I'm an atheist living in a Muslim country. Some of them want help getting out, which with travel restrictions, they can't go anywhere anyways. And they think we can get them a visa and get them out, which we can't do. But, a lot of times we can just give them, some moral support that there's someone like them out there in the world. They can have somebody to talk to. That's not going to be, it's not like living in Nazi Germany where they're talking to somebody in their country and they're not worried if they're going to get turned into the local Gestapo, if I can make that analogy. So a lot of times it's just moral support. So Tina is the director of the Atheist Support Network. So thanks, Tina. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, Tina. It's a pleasure to have you here. It's kind of scary to know that there are countries where if you come out as atheists, you are literally risking your own life as doing so. And I've actually myself, I've gotten emails from people looking for help. Of course, I turn them to other areas or other organizations that could help them a lot better than I could, because I'm just some schmuck from Western Canada, right? So I'll point them out to you guys or to Courtney's or to whoever is doing these kinds of things. Freedom from Religion Foundation, that kind of thing. They have resources as well to help these folks. So, but I always give them encouraging words, and I say, listen, there's a lot of people out there that are in the same boat as you, and there is help out there if you know where to look. So I give them the links, and a couple have written me back and say, thank you very much. It helped out, that kind of thing. But I guess just being a personality on YouTube, and they may have stumbled across and see me talking to people about their deconversions, they figured I might know some stuff that others wouldn't, which, to some degree is true. But
Rosie. Yeah,
hello, Rosie.
There was I had one kid in Bangladesh who was very intellectually curious about the history of religion. And so, there's a lot of us that have access to the inbox. And I guess maybe it was just dumb luck that he got me one day that I saw him come in, and, because I've done all the research, so I was able to point him, I would send him links to YouTube documentaries, books that he could read online, because he probably doesn't have access to a public library. So just, he would have certain intellectual questions about some historical thing. I'm like, okay, look here, read this book, watch this video, which he seemed to appreciate. So.
Well, I'm glad we have people like you that are able to point people in those directions, because ultimately it really does help. I forgot to ask you before we went live, are you fine with doing a bit of an after party? Because you've jumped in one of my after parties recently.
Yeah, no, I'm up now. It's 8 almost 9 in the morning here. I'm up. I've had my coffee, so no problem.
Ready to go.
Your point about Atheists in Danger.
Yes.
If I can talk with that. So the same conference in Taipei in 2016 where Michael Sherlock and I were at, I met a Pakistani secular humanist who had traveled to Taipei. And then in 2018, I went to work in Pakistan for a year. And I didn't know where he was, but we'd added each other on Facebook. And I said, hey, I'm here, and I won't say the city. I'm here in this city. Are you happen to be nearby? He goes, yeah, I'm about an hour or two away. He said, hey, can I actually come and have dinner with you? And he brought a friend of his, another humanist. And again, like in Nazi Germany, in these Muslim theocracies, you got to sneak around and hide from the secret police. Yeah. And so he brought a friend with him. And we were having dinner in a public restaurant, and we're talking about atheism. And we're talking in very hushed, whispered tones, and looking around furtively and make sure no one can overhear us. And that's when I had the dawning comprehension. This is what freedom really is. That, when we're in Canada, we can talk freely and we're not going to get dragged into the street and beaten and killed or arrested for having a conversation. And that's when it really, really hit me what freedom truly means. The fact that we're having a simple conversation in a restaurant that could get us beaten, killed, or imprisoned.
Yeah.
And that was such a huge wake-up call. And even here, I'm here in Bangkok this morning. And even Bangkok, what's going on in Bangkok with the riots and the protests? I can't speak out. The laws here, I'd get arrested if I speak out and speak my mind. And even I can't even blaspheme against Buddha here without being arrested for insulting religious feelings.
I was just going to ask, they have blasphemy laws?
Yep.
Wow. I hear there's lots of places that do, by the way, that have blasphemy laws. And it just, every time I hear that there's some place with blasphemy laws, I'm like, really, is your belief system that weak that you have to have blasphemy laws? That people can't speak their mind about specific beliefs without you wanting to, like, seriously, if your deities are real, then you should have no fear of this at all.
Yeah. But they don't want to hurt their feelings. If I just remembered this, I had this conversation over dinner in Pakistan with a different guy, with a believer in Pakistan. And he was telling me that the whole end time, the Armageddon scenario, the end of the world, Judgment Day, that's a Muslim concept. I went, no, it isn't. It's in the book of Revelation, which predates Muhammad by like 500 years. And that comes from the Zoroastrian, which predates Islam by 1,000 years. So how can it be a Muslim thing? And he goes, well, you shouldn't say things that hurt my feelings. I went, why not? He goes, you just shouldn't. And I said, well, it's not against the law. And he went, well, it should be. I went, ha, and that's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Good point. It's like, grow a little skin there, pal. I mean, you have your beliefs, and that's fine. You're entitled to them. But if people, because let's face it, our belief systems become an emotional thing for us. Because crutch is a good word, but I mean, it's a part of who you are, I guess, as your beliefs. And a lot of the time, believers have this inability to separate what they believe from themselves. So when you attack a belief system, they feel like it's a personal attack.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I can understand being in that position because I once was myself a long time ago. But I don't think I ever would have responded to somebody quite like that. Like, oh, don't hurt my feelings because of my beliefs. That's just silly.
Like the teacher in France, he shows a picture and then some wacko goes and cuts his head off. I'm like, okay, oh, we hurt your feelings. Oh, boo-hoo. I think Stephen Fry has the best answer. Well, I offended you. Well, so what?
So what? Yeah, I love that one. Yeah. And there's a lot more to that expression too, guys. I actually used to use that quote quite a bit as well, because I think I don't go out of my way to offend people. I'll say that. But on occasion when it does happen, I'll say, well, can you not separate yourself from this sort of thought? Like, I'm not doing it to offend you. I'm stating something that I think is offensive. And if that offends you, then, hey, we'll talk about it. You don't have to get all crazy about it. We can talk about it.
And A.C. Grayling has a great quote. It's been making the rounds on Twitter the last couple of days I've seen about how, when you guys were in charge, you burnt us at the stake. All we're doing is asking you some questions and you're upset.
Mm-hmm. I love A.C. Grayling. It's hard. It's hard to deal with people that have that sort of thought. That if you upset me about my belief system, then somehow I have the right to behead you or kill you or burn you or whatever. I think that's just utterly ridiculous, and I don't think that I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon in a lot of places. But hopefully, we as a species in general evolve past that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's got a few more generations. I think the internet age is doing a lot to kill it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Definitely. You could say the same thing though. I mean, you've got all these people out there that are flat earthers. I mean, the internet can be a bad tool as well as a good tool, But of course, it comes down to the individual and knowing how to use the internet and for better purposes as well, right? Yeah. And thank you. Quiet Gorilla is spoiling me this month. Second time you made $20 drink.
Stephen Fry.
$2 for the drinks for referencing Stephen Fry. Yeah, Stephen Fry's awesome. There's a little video I've seen him with Hugh Laurie, one of these Q&A things they have in the UK, and the two of them are referenced from the host, I guess, being in the audience, and they shoot the shit a little bit. I'm not going to say anything about it because if you're interested, you can go and check it out. I'm pretty sure, and Hugh Laurie looks so young there, like back in his days of Black Adam.
No, they've been friends for a long time.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Have you seen, or if your watchers haven't seen it, Intelligence Squared back in October 2009? That was Hitchens and Fry on the Intelligence Squared. Is the Catholic Church a force for good?
Mm-hmm. I've seen that.
It is. I've watched Stephen Fry's opening intro like 100 times, and I get goosebumps every time I watch it. I never get tired of watching it. So
he's him and Hitchens. Both of them are so good with words and how they present like their case or whatever. They make their statements. They're both really good at that. Yeah. Well, my friend, why don't we can probably wrap things up. So I think these are things that we can talk about in the after party as well. So is there anything you wanted to let people know about that you may have coming up that you want to shill out before we call this one quits and jump into an after party?
Yeah, just say this. So my first book, which is out there, is Manifest Insanity, which is a history of Judeo-Christian doctrine. So it's a history book, and it's a social commentary directed at the U.S. Christian right. That you believe the Bible is literally true and inerrant, and therefore, you're entitled to stack the Supreme Court. You're entitled to limit abortion. You're entitled to deny gay rights. Well, here's a history of everything you believe and why you're wrong about it. It's also, because Dr. Strangelove is my favorite movie, the subplot is a Dr. Strangelove plot where instead of this whole East-West rivalry, it's the left-right. And the Southern Bible states have seceded to form their own Christian theocracy, and the Americans, some crazy general sends a bomber to bomb the Bible states. So that's the subplot. So, awesome. And then the new book, Dangerous Ideas, which is the history of secular arguments. I post occasionally on the blog. I'm posting little bits of my book as I go through it. So I think the current one is the intro to the Hobbes and Spinoza chapter. So if you're interested in the intellectual side of atheist history, it might be something you want to check out.
Awesome. And I have lots of links for Diogenes of Mayberry. There, I said it right. Of Mayberry down below, so you can go and check out everything that he does. Hello, The Rage. You just showed up at the end of the show, but that's all right. We're going to do an after party, guys. So if you're interested in joining us for the after party, please let me know through the Twitter DMs or the Facebook Messenger, as I am on both of those, and you can get in touch with me there. And I'd love to have you in with a conversation with myself. And can I use your real name? Is that even possible?
Yeah, my name's Jason.
Right. Well, I knew that, but I didn't want to because, I'm kind of the anti-doxing kind of guy, unless it's okay with you. No, if you want to join Jason and myself, please let me know, and we'll get that going probably within about 10 minutes. I always like to have a little bit of a break between the shows because I have to pee because, like I said, I was drinking earlier too, and we don't buy our beer. We just rent it. But we'll do that shortly. So look for there is a link to the after party down below, so you can head right on over there and go get yourself a little snack if you like, and grab a beer or a wine or a shot of scotch if that's what you do. And you can join us for that. Until next time, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. And like I always say at the end of these things, with the COVID virus thing going on, the pandemic happening right now, remember to be well and be safe, and above all, be kind. And as I always close the show, like the late, great Christopher Hitchens once said, it's called faith because it's not knowledge. And stick around for my outro, because if you like the song at the beginning, you're going to love the ending of it. And we'll talk to you guys later.
untangle.